So the first thing I'd like to do is just show you how to access the virtual tours, if you'd like to see them again on your own time. So this is this RAFFMA website on CSUSB. So it's just csusb.edu/RAFFMA. And if you go to the Visit tab here at the top and click Endomorphism, there will be a link at the bottom here that takes you to the virtual gallery. And you'll end up on a page that looks something like this. So we can go ahead and get started with the virtual tour. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask them. I don't have my chat open, but you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question if you have a question. So the virtual tour starts here at the front of the museum, and we're going to be touring probably one of the more difficult tours to give virtually. And this is primarily because David's work is kinetic and it moves, and these galleries are static. But I'd like to introduce you to Endomorphism by David B. Jang. And David is a Korean artist. He is currently housed in Los Angeles, and he works out of his warehouse there. And here at the entrance to the gallery, we have his first installation. And this installation is entitled Compression Panorama. And it is comprised of these water bottles. They're gallon water bottles, which David has hooked up to an air compressor. And he uses a heat gun to kind of heat up and soften the plastic. And so as he's using the air compressor to fill them up, they kind of expand like balloons. And it creates this light bulb-like effect. And you can see here the shadows that this installation creates. Now, the 3 installations in the exhibition are all hooked up to motion sensors. So when you enter the gallery, this installation would activate. So here's the motion sensor. And as you walk in, it would activate and turn on, and it vibrates. And I'd like to show you a little video of this. He's used this installation in different places. So he has a video on his Vimeo that kind of shares what the installation does. So I'm going to share that with you. So in the gallery, it consumed the space very much. It was very loud. I don't know, could everyone hear that okay? I wasn't sure how well the sound would transfer, but yeah, it definitely consumed the space. It was very loud. It's hard to talk over. And so we luckily had an on and off switch for that installation. But the way it works is each bottle has a vibrating motor that it's hooked up to. And from there, the vibrating motor is connected to a custom circuit board kind of hidden in the ceiling here. And that custom circuit board kind of randomizes the cycles that the installation vibrates at. So it would turn on, it would vibrate for a few moments, turn off, turn back on. And each time it did that, it was a different pattern. And when David talks about that component of vibration in this installation, he talks about how vibration is used as something that brings us to attention and makes us feel alert. So if you think about the way your phone vibrates when you have a message, it notifies you. If you're on a plane and some irregular vibrations take place, it'll bring you to attention. So in that sense, as you walk into the gallery, this installation is kind of intended to bring you to attention. Another thing I'd like to talk about with this piece, as we kind of move away from it. This is a good view. In the video I showed, you saw that the piece was actually oriented differently. And the way David works his installations is he actually creates them to fit within the space. He likes to highlight elements of the architecture unique to that space And rather than making an installation or a sculpture that stands alone in the space, he wants to make something that's integrated into the space and can become a part of the space. So when David first came to the gallery, I believe it was in fall of 2018, where he showed in a Korean exhibit that we had. He saw this skylight and he got really excited about it and he wanted to use it. So when he gave us the proposal for this exhibition, this was one of the first things he talked about, was integrating this piece into the skylight here. So he does this with all his installations. He adapts them and they change from place to place. And here in the hallway, we have some different pieces. I guess I'll start here with this one. Got a very close view of it. And this is comprised, these 4 installations, there's 4 of them in the hallway here. They're comprised of aluminum sheets. And David buys these sheets brand new. He buys them in perfect condition. They're mass-produced pieces of aluminum. And he buys them, and then what he does to them is he submerges 2 of them in water, salt water, and then he will hook one up to a positive current and another one up to a negative current. And what that does is that it runs electricity through the metal. And so he'll place them so that you have a positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, and you can kind of tell the difference in the metal. See how this one's a little bit darker, this one's a little bit lighter. The positive currents are typically darker. And so they kind of develop this, this corrosion over the metal. And he talks about this in the sense that he's interested in giving the pieces some sort of life. So when we're born very small, and we age over time, and we change, and our bodies change, and then ultimately at the end of this, we die. And David talks about this element of mortality as a source of meaning in our lives. If we didn't have a deadline to get things done, there would be no meaning behind them. So he likes to kind of accelerate this process in his installations and express it in different ways. So with this installation, he's accelerating and intentionally decomposing the metal to create this sort of aesthetic. So this is a bare aluminum. There's no paint on it. The one behind me has paint on it. And you can see that once it's put into the salt water and electricity is run through them, that it deteriorates the paint and flakes the paint off. And he was very specific with us when installing in the gallery. He said that he did not want us to clean up any of the paint that came off of these wall pieces, that they were to stay here under the pieces. So we had to make sure to tell the custodians not to clean any of that up, and it's kind of funny. The colors also have some significance here. This color scheme, it's kind of hard to tell in this photo. It doesn't really give you the true effect, but this orange is very much kind of like a neon orange. These are bright colors, very reflective colors, and they're, again, related to this idea of attention. So when you drive by a construction site, these are some of the bright colors that you might see, and they're meant to grab your attention. Here in this part of the gallery, we have a couple more. So David, he's very much kind of a DIY guy, and for a lot of his installations, he works on custom circuit boards and creates these boards that can function in the way that he wants. So this one here, this color scheme is related to the resistors found on a circuit board. So each one would represent a different level of voltage that can pass through them. This one here is meant to represent the color bars that you might see on your television, kind of like off the air color bars. And then here at the end of the hallway, we have another installation piece, and this one's entitled Aerial Wave. So I'll share with you a few moments of a video that David has on his Vimeo of this installation working at another space. You hear kind of like a static sound. Maybe some voices coming through. Some music coming through. So this piece, the way it works, again, there's a motion sensor in the corner. So as you get close to the piece, it turns on. And within each one of these electrical boxes, we have radio transmitters. And the radio transmitters are all daisy chained together. And again, they're hooked up to a custom circuit board that will quickly switch the stations on each one of them. So they cycle through the stations of the surrounding area. And again, kind of going back to the site specification of David's work, he adapts the work to fit within the gallery. And in this case, this work actually takes the sound waves in the area around where it's installed and makes it a part of the piece. So it ties it to the area. So when people would come and see the installation in the gallery, they could recognize some of the radio stations that would pop through the static. And again, it's made from everyday materials. So this is just conduit pipe that you could buy at Home Depot, electrical boxes that you could buy at Home Depot. And then he has radio transmitters within each of them. So he's transforming these everyday objects into something else and making something new of them. The last thing we have in the gallery for David is this large installation room. And we should be able to move in here as well. So this piece is entitled Prevaricate, and it's comprised of these everyday household fans, box fans that you might have. And what he does is he strips them of all the adornments, so takes off the white plastic and the grill that would be on them and just leaves them as bare bone as possible. And these fans, he cuts out small holes and takes weed whacker wire, and then he ties them to the floor. So they're tied to the floor down here. And this piece has a motion sensor at the front of the gallery, so it activates as you come in. And what happens is all of these fans will spin up for a few seconds. They spin up for a few seconds, and as that happens, this wire builds up in tension. And then they will stop. And when the motors turn off, the wire will force the fan to spin back the opposite direction. So in this case, he's interested in how energy can be transferred. So he's transferring energy down into the wire, and then the wire will spin the fans back the opposite direction. And I'll show you briefly this piece in action. So here the installation is installed in a gallery in Korea, I believe. And it's very interactive. David wants you to be able to walk with things. He wants you to touch the piece and interact with it and become immersed in it. And you can see kids have a lot of fun with this one. That is popular in the gallery as well. So that's the piece in action. Something that I thought that was kind of comical about this piece, each one of these fans has a mini fan, kind of like a computer fan that sits behind the motor. And because these fans aren't intended to spin backwards, when he was testing this piece in his studio, he would find that the motors on the fans would often burn out. So he's installed this mini computer fan behind each one of these fans that is constantly running, and that fan is cooling down the motor of the fan. So I just thought it was kind of ironic that he needed a fan to cool down the fan. But this is Prevaricate. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with is kind of this philosophy that David approaches all his work with. He considers everything he does as research, but he was inspired as a young kid by the functioning of a cloud. He saw the cloud when he was young, and he even refers to it as an installation. So he saw this cloud, and the cloud holds water. It rains, the rain runs down into the ocean, and again, the water is evaporated to form another cloud. And this cyclical cycle, this relationship that it has also with the earth, that it provides nourishment to the earth. And he tries to create or embody some sort of philosophy related to that in his work. And I think this is one of the works that kind of exemplifies that best with the transfer of energy down and back up. So with that, I'd like to conclude the tour. And I'm also going to put a couple of links in the chat here that share 2 films that were made by a videographer that David had come to the museum. His name is Eric Min Swenson, but these show the actual installations inside the museum. Let's see if I can access the chat here. Okay. So you can actually see all of the installations here in the museum via those 2 links. If you'd like to check them out, I'll go ahead and play this on lower volume. I don't know if it affects your volume if I turn down the volume on the video. So I'll let that play. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer some questions about David's work. And you can either type them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. My pleasure. Thanks, Linda. Yeah, you can see here David's fan barricade installation working, and it actually works in cycles as well. There's kind of a rhythm to it. So they would all spin up once, and then they'll kind of come down in sections. David, does David create all the electrical engineering elements himself, the custom circuit, etc.? No, actually he buys, so they sell these circuit boards and kind of computers that that are essentially blank. I believe he calls them like Raspberry Pi. I believe that's what it's called, and it's basically a small computer board or circuit board that is fully programmable, and so he uses those, and then he will do kind of the oh, turn down the volume. I'll just pause the volume of the video. So he uses these Raspberry Pis, and then he will go into the programming of the board and code in exactly what he would like to do with that board. So he doesn't make the board himself, but he'll do the coding behind it so that it functions the way he wants it to. So you can see that this aerial wave installation compared to the way we saw it here, oh, this is the wrong video, is installed a little bit differently. He had originally imagined, on video, here we go. He had originally imagined this piece kind of being attached to the wall. imagine these attached to the wall so that these lines would be hooked up to the wall and they would actually surround the whole gallery. So this whole hallway would have been filled with the aerial wave installation. But we thought it might be a little bit monotonous, so we asked him to bring up something different for the hallway, and he brought these 2D pieces. Is the virtual tour shot with 360 view. So yeah, we had this company called Matterport come out, and they brought 360 cameras. And the way I believe it works, I didn't get to see it happen in action, but these dots here are essentially a point where they took a photograph. And so from these points, you can see in all directions. If you look up, you can kind of see this blurred spot where I guess it doesn't capture entirely what's there. But yeah, that's how I believe they did it. How do you typically get in touch with artists that showcase at RAFFMA? Oh, okay. So so for this show in particular, we had another exhibition prior, the Ancient Futures exhibition, which featured 4 different Korean artists alongside some ancient Korean artifacts that we have at the museum. And David was one of those artists. So that's how we got to know David, and David got to know the museum. And so when he visited, he got really excited about the space and wanted to do something on his own. And he submitted a proposal to Eva. And then Eva and John kind of talk about the details with David, and if everything seems agreeable and we like the project, then we we move forward. We set a date and then we make it happen. I'm not too involved as far as picking the artists. I do more of the educational end. So I think my favorite process, part of that process, is getting to know the artists and talking with them a little bit and understanding their work better, so that I can give tours and answer questions if need be. So yeah, that's my favorite part. And then I also like putting together the tour after that conversation. Yeah. Let's see. I guess we could go back to this one. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Nate. Thanks for joining us. So here you get a view of all of the wires here. He also has a power supply up there. Oh yeah, so the virtual gallery can be accessed at raffma.csusb.edu. So if you go to that page there, you'll have this tab that says Visit. And from there, you can go down to different exhibitions on view. The one we looked at today is the Endomorphism. So you just click Endomorphism, and then the link to the virtual gallery will be right there. And you can also look at still images if you like. And once you click that, it'll take you to a page that looks something like this. And you could see the whole virtual gallery from there. So yeah, the shadows on this piece are very nice as well. So that video was shot by Eric Min Swenson. So we're very thankful that he came by and made a video of that work, because you really don't get the get the full sense of the exhibition without the movement and that kinetic aspect to it. Since everything in these are photograph based and it has to be static. Hopefully in the future we can do something where maybe we can actually have the elements of the installation move around you. I think that'd be pretty cool. Right. So if no one else has any more questions, I think that'll kind of conclude this session. Thank you all so much for joining us.